Hello my lovely potatoes and welcome back to a new video. Today we're doing a tutorial. Yeah, I thought I might do something different this time and introduce you to the wonders of Clip Studio Paint. And I thought I might want to start with a feature that's probably saving you hours when you're doing work with line art. So vector layers are pretty much the perfect thing to start with in this case. So you probably might know about raster layers. I mean, who in the digital art realm does not? And if you're doing line art, especially when you're into the manga, comic, or anime style, even though manga and anime style is pretty much the same. However, then you're probably going to work with line art anyway. So, to show you what makes vector lines so special, I'm going to show you first what makes raster layers subpar for line art. So let's just make a circle with a raster layer and look at it and see all those awful lines. And then we're going for the bucket tool and, well, maybe not like that. Let's just turn down the tolerance quite a bit and the area scaling, and then you can see it. You can see it. It's usually that the filling is not quite touching the lines, and if it does, you definitely see those little gaps in the middle right there. It's also pretty nice that with Clip Studio Paint you have those options of area scaling and such, but I think that vector layers are having a big advantage when it comes to filling and line art. So what makes vector layers so special is, well, let's first put that away real quick, and it's gone. What makes vector layers so special is they are so easy to edit. So to start a vector layer, you want to go to this little plus layer symbol with a little box in it, and you just made a vector layer. The cool thing about vector layers is you can use any brush that you want, that you have in your toolbox. So for this one, I'm just going to use my favorite line brush, the NA brush, which is perfectly suited for animation and is, I think, even provided by an animation studio. So this is really useful when you want really clean and crisp lines with a little bit of a drag, as you can see. And the vector layers are so special because instead of just simply lines, your lines consist of points, control points to be specific. Up here I have a little option that lets me see all the control points on my vector lines, and with this little operation tool, a little arrow with a box, you can actually either drag the whole thing or single points. Though since this line here has so many points that you would just squeeze around a tiny fraction of your vector line, there is a little correct line tool that you can use to decimate some of these masses of dots, control points. So you can pretty much just trace your line and then decimate the control points to a point that you just have a few to fiddle around with. I mean, just look here. Now we have just a few points that we can simply drag around and make the whole thing a lot easier. So I really like that because it makes things so much easier when you have to edit your line art. Another thing that you can do with this operation tool is completely redraw the line, which also gives the whole thing a lot more points. Or correct the line width either statically by simply just giving the whole thing a fixed width. That word is not easy. That word is really not easy to pronounce, so I'm sorry for that. Or you can also redraw the line width by using pen pressure, which is also, it's a godsend tool, I tell you that. If you're using line art, this is just so incredibly helpful because you can just fade out those lines or make them thicker as you go without even having to redraw over and over those lines. I still do it though, not gonna lie. I still have this weird reflex of just going to doing my undo button. I pushed that button so many times on my tablet. It's not funny anymore. So, to properly show you what these vector layers are capable of, because this is just a little bit of it, I have actually prepared a little sketch. So, this adorable little Feldy face wants to be aligned. So, what we can do is start with the hair. And oh no, I have too much line in my line art. So what I can do is go to my eraser and choose the vector eraser. And then I can just take away the overlapping line and everything is nice and smooth or nice and groovy. Because this eraser has this little box ticked and it says whenever I erase something that crosses each other, I can simply just erase out the overlap from the point where it's overlapping. It makes things a lot quicker and a lot easier. So that's one thing. For the rest, I might need to actually finish the line art on this one, so give me a minute. So, another nice feature of vector lines is that they are really nice when you want to fill in your flat colors. Because as you have earlier seen, when you fill in your colors and don't really use the bucket tool with modified options, you just get those really ugly little spaces between filling and the line. So what I like to do with those vector layers and those vector lines is I turn them into a reference layer, because that makes things a shit ton easier. Make a raster layer right beneath it, use my bucket tool right here, and set it to take from reference layer, this little thing down here. So reference layer is always this little lighthouse. So when I use my preferred color for my hair, like here, you can see it's really nicely filled in. And if you go close, you can kind of see that there are no ugly little gaps in between. It really goes underneath the whole thing. Also, how did I not notice that there is a little something right there? There we go. So that's a really nice feature. Another thing is when I go back to the vector layer, up here where the hair is parting, we can actually connect those vector lines with this little tool. Everything's connected now. I really like that. So that's also a really nice feature if you need to edit your vector lines afterwards. You can pretty much connect them and make the whole thing a lot nicer and with a lot less dots, even though I have not simplified it here. But it's really useful if you just simplify those lines. You can edit them so much easier. Though I have to warn you, when you use that after you filled in your line work, you might want to redo it. You really might want to redo it, as you can see here, because it also changes partially how the lines behave and how they bend. So that's something you have to look out for. So another cool feature with those vector lines is something I like to use with smaller spaces, and that's using a marker with the option of, wait a sec, do not cross lines of reference layer. Works a lot better with vector layers because it is actually referencing the dots, the control points of the vector line art instead of the rasters around it. Because it's simply just applying somewhat of a stamp on top of the line that is made with the control dots. So that's also really useful. For example, if I go in here into my closed eye here, whoops, you can kind of see that even though my brush is going on top and over the whole thing, it does not cross the line, except if I go a bit too far. But that happens to anyone. And then you can quickly just undo out of it. So that's really nice if you want to do really small spaces. Sometimes I have to correct because it does not quite fill. Mostly sometimes because my, whoops, that's the wrong brush. Oh, that's the right one. All right. So sometimes I have to do some really small spaces because my brush is a bit too big to fill in, or I just have to scale down the brush and then it works again. So that's some stuff that you can do with vector layers. As I said, you can smush them around, you can turn down the amount of control points, which then in turn also makes it easier to edit the whole thing. I mean, here you can pretty much see I can just bend it into a very different shape. So that's also really useful. Another thing that's also useful is when you use vector lines, you can pretty much scale them up and down without losing resolution. This is something that you can't really do with raster layers. So let's put that into a folder and just make it invisible right here. Make that invisible too. Then I'm going to make a new vector layer and a new raster layer. So I'm just going to show you real quick how that looks with a raster layer, how it's just pretty much just rasterizing really badly. Make that little circle, transform it, scale it up. As you can see, it's getting all fuzzy right there. And if I do that with a vector layer, let's go with a different, no, let's go with the same brush, but in a different color. Really quick. There we go. And I do that with a vector layer. As you already can see, it's not as washy and as blurry anymore because it's going along those dots, except instead of just scaling the whole raster layer up. And that's really useful if you have to work with in print, or when you have to do scalable stuff anyway. And I love vector layers. I love using them, especially for animation, is because they are so bendable and upscalable. And I hope you start to love vector layers like me too. And I'll see you in the next one. In the next video, tutorial. We'll see. Until then, bye bye.